Passage 1 is adapted from a speech delivered to Parliament in 1780 by Edmund Burke. Passage 2 is adapted from a speech delivered in 1784 by Sir John St. Auburn. Both men were elected members of the British Parliament, a legislative body that shared authority with the monarch. To govern according to the sense and agreeably to the interests of the people is a great and glorious object of government. This object cannot be obtained but through the medium of popular election, and popular election is a mighty evil. They are the distempers of elections that have destroyed all free states. To cure these distempers is difficult, if not impossible. The only thing, therefore, left to save the Commonwealth is to prevent their return too frequently. The objects in view are to have parliaments as frequent as they can be without distracting them in the prosecution of public business. On one hand, to secure their independence upon the people, on the other, to give them that quiet in their minds and that ease in their fortunes as to enable them to perform the most arduous and most painful duty in the world with spirit, with efficiency, independence, and experience, as real public councillors, not as canvassers at a perpetual election. All are agreed that parliaments should not be perpetual. The only question is what is the most convenient time for their duration. We are agreed too that the term ought not to be chosen most likely in its operation to spread corruption and to augment the already overgrown influence of the crown. On these principles, I mean to debate the question. It is easy to pretend a zeal for liberty. Those who think themselves not likely to be encumbered with the performance of their promises, either from their known inability or total indifference about the performance, never fail to entertain the most lofty ideas. They are certainly the most specious, and they cost them neither reflection to frame, nor pains to modify, nor management to support. The task is of another nature to those who mean to promise nothing that is not in their intention, or may possibly be in their power to perform. To those who are bound in principle no more to delude the understandings than to violate the liberty of their fellow subjects. Faithful watchmen we ought to be over the rights and privileges of the people, but our duty, if we are qualified for it as we ought, is to give them information and not to receive it from them. We are not to go to school to them to learn the principles of law and government. In doing so, we should not dutifully serve, but we should basely and scandalously betray the people who are not capable of this service by nature, nor in any instance called to it by the Constitution. Okay. Burke indicates in passage 1 that elections should not be so frequent that they force legislators to adopt corrupt practices, make legislators take their re-election for granted, cause legislators to be inattentive to their duties, lead legislators to become self-important. Okay, so let's read this part again. We are agreed to that the term ought not to be chosen most likely in its operation to spread corruption and to augment the already overgrown influence of the crown. So we should not have perpetual parliaments because, the term ought to be chosen in a way so that corruption is reduced. Okay, but you're talking about not so frequent. Okay, let's read more. It is easy to pretend a zeal for liberty. Those who think themselves not likely to be encumbered. Okay, the object cannot. They are the distempers. The only thing, therefore, is to prevent their return too frequently. On the other, to give them quiet in their minds. Okay, so yeah, so I would go with C, because the idea that, if it happens too often, then enable them to perform the most arduous and most painful duty with spirit and efficiency. They will not be able to perform these duties if the elections happened too frequently. Based on passage 1, Burke most likely believes that for some politicians, proposing idealistic plans is a way of advancing the well-being of the nation by promoting progressive thinking, displaying an optimistic outlook that enhances their speeches, encouraging voters to end their allegiance to the crown, giving the appearance of caring more about constituents than they actually do. So this is D. This comes from here. Those who think themselves not likely to be encumbered with the performance of their promises, either from their own inability or total indifference, never fail to entertain the most lofty ideas. So the most lofty ideas come from those who don't really care about, and with choice, this would be line 29 to 33, 28 to 33, right? What about 33 to 36? They're certainly the most specious, and they cost them neither reflection nor pains nor management to support, right? But we are talking about not caring about constituents. So I'm looking at the word indifference, which comes in option C, 28 to 33. In passage 1, Burke's use of the word watchman serves mainly to here. Faithful watchmen we ought to be over the rights and privileges of the people, but our duty, if we are qualified for it as we ought, is to give them information, not to receive it from them. Clarify the role of legislators in protecting the freedoms of the governed. Illustrate a misconception held by a number of uninformed voters. Emphasize the importance of legislators in shaping public opinion about controversies. Acknowledge that legislators must ultimately yield to the crown's sovereignty. So it's A. He says that we need to be watchmen, presiding over people's rights and privileges. So legislators need to protect the freedom of the governed, right? It is not a misconception. So B is wrong. It's got nothing to do with controversies or allegiance to the crown. Okay. Passage 2. Human nature is so very corrupt that all obligations lose their force unless they are frequently renewed. Long parliaments become therefore independent of the people, and when they do so, there always happens a most dangerous dependence elsewhere. It has of late been denied that the people have a right of remonstrating to us. It has been called an unjustifiable control upon our proceedings. But then let them have more frequent opportunities of varying the choice of their representatives, that they may dismiss such who have unfaithfully withdrawn their attention from them. The influencing powers of the crown are daily increasing, and it is highly requisite that parliaments should be frequently responsible to their constituents, that they should be kept under the constant awe of acting contrary to their interests. Modern history will inform us that some very dangerous attempts upon our liberties have been disappointed, not so much from the virtue of many in this house as from the apprehensions that they may have had of an approaching election. I think too that nothing can be of greater use to His Majesty than frequent new parliaments, that he may often take the fresh sense of the nation and not be partially advised. For his measures will always have a greater weight both at home and abroad, the more generally he refers himself to the opinion of the people. A farther mischief of long parliaments is that a minister has time and opportunities of getting acquaintance with members and of practicing his several arts to win them into his schemes. But this must be the work of time. Corruption is of so base a nature that at the first sight it is extremely shocking. Hardly anyone has submitted to it all at once. One or two people have deserted their colors the first campaign, some have done it a second, but a great many who have not that eager disposition to vice will wait till a third. Okay, in passage 2, Saint Aubin emphasizes the significance of past situations in which the rights of the people were most strongly protected by the legislators' concern about an upcoming election, commitment to their integrity, voters' anxieties about the intervention from Crown, voters' demands for the removal of corrupt leaders. So this is A. This comes from here that modern history is replete with instances where dangerous attempts upon the liberties have been disappointed by apprehensions that these legislators had of an approaching election. As used in line 85, arts most nearly means members and of practicing his several arts to win them into his schemes. So getting ministers, getting members to be corrupt, sophisticated skills, right? Arts here would mean the way they get members of parliament to be corrupt. It's not true with interpretation because you're talking about how you influence members or rules or creations. Based on passage 2, Saint Aubin would most likely attribute the corruption among government representatives to a human failing that leads them to yield to temptation too easily, naivety that prevents them from recognizing dishonest motives in fellow representatives, lack of vigilance regarding a monarch's tendency to wrest power from elected leaders, steady deterioration of values that gradually undermines the mission of elected leaders. So it's D because he says it's a stepwise process, right? How does it happen? It is of so base a nature that at first sight it is extremely shocking. Hardly anyone has submitted to it all at once. One or two perhaps have deserted the colors of the first campaign. Some have done it a second time. But a great many who have not that eager disposition to wise will wait till a third. So it's a steady deterioration. It doesn't happen all at once. Yeah, so it's not about yielding to temptation too easily or naivety, and definitely there's no mention of the monarch here. Which choice from passage 2 best represents St. Aubyn's likely response to Burke regarding the problem of legislators who make specious proposals to their constituents? Okay. 34. They are certainly the most specious and they cause them neither. Who is the most specious? The ones who are unlikely to be encumbered with the performance of their purposes, neither reflection to frame, nor pains to modify, nor management to support. Okay, so how would Burke react to it? Let's mark the line numbers. Oh, okay. So it is 52, 54, 54, 57, 50, 52, right? 52 to 54, 54 to 57, then 60, 64, 78, 81. 60, 64, and 78 to 81. Okay. So I'm talking about people who are not likely to be encumbered with the performance of their promises, and they are specious because, okay, human nature is so very corrupt that all obligations lose their force unless they are frequently renewed. Long parliaments become therefore independent of the people, and when they do so, there always happens the most dangerous dependence elsewhere. Let them have their frequent opportunities of varying the choice of their representatives that may dismiss those who have unfaithfully withdrawn their attention from them. For his measures will always have a greater weight. Okay, so this is about the monarch, so this is not relevant. So we are talking in this context about parliament should not be perpetual. We are agreed to that the term ought not to be chosen most likely in its operation to spread corruption. On these principles, it is easy to pretend a zeal for liberty, right? And we are talking about their specious proposals to their constituents. So what is the best way? I think I'll go with C because this gives a solution to the problem of those who make specious promises that people should just go to the ballot and elect new representatives if they are not satisfied. The problem of legislators, right? So I'll C is a good answer. Based on passage 1, Burke would most likely reject the concept of a right of remonstrating by arguing that voters do not possess. Okay, 59. It has of late been denied that the people have a right of remonstrating to us. It has been called an unjustifiable control upon our proceedings. Okay, so how would Burke react to that? Voters do not possess adequate knowledge of the Crown's intentions, first-hand experience of collective negotiations, persistent motivation to advise legislators on policy, sufficient wisdom to arrive at sound judgments. So I think it's D, because towards the end he says people who are not capable of this service by nature, nor in any instance called to it by the Constitution. So we should not seek information or advice from them. So his response is that the people don't have sufficient wisdom. It's not to do with the Crown's intentions or negotiations or motivation. It's to do with wisdom. Based on passage 1, Burke would most likely assert that St. Aubyn's assumption about an effective way to obtain a fresh sense of the nation, which is through voting, is at odds with conditions that would lead to when he talks about a fresh sense of the nation, he's obviously talking about elections and how the Crown can benefit from an idea of what the people are thinking, and is at odds with conditions that would lead to a civil and harmonious tone during frequent legislative campaigns, vigorous and sustained effort to discredit the Crown, stable and calm environment for legislative deliberation, clear set of ethical standards. Okay. So he's talking about frequent election, right? And I think Burke would not be in favor of that. On these principles, over the rights of, okay. Yeah, without distracting them in the persecution or prosecution of public business, to secure their independence, on the other hand, to give them the quiet in their minds, right? So he's not in favor of frequent elections because he thinks it does not give them the space to legislate, right? They should not be canvassers at a perpetual election. So his response would be civil and harmonious tone, vigorous and sustained effort. Yeah, I would go with C, right? He wants a clear and calm environment for legislative deliberation, which would be not possible if elections were held frequently. Okay, let's grade this 32. Yeah. Reading 32 CDCAA, CAAA in fact, CDCAAA, and 38 to 41. 38 to 41, DCDC. DCDC.